Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's podcast, I have got John Burdekin from JB Fleet Consultancy Limited. Just to say thank you very much for joining me, John, and really nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you too.
Thank you. And you are, I'm reading this, an experienced specialist consultant in helping clients make the transition to electric vehicles. So what does that mean? Tell me a bit more.
What does that mean? It means it's broadly aimed at answering the question, if somebody runs a fleet of vehicles, predominantly cars in my world, I know people that do vans, I can do a bit of vans, but mainly cars. I know I need to go electric, but I've got no idea how to do it. Can you help me? That is, in a nutshell, that is what I help people do. I help businesses do that, but I also help suppliers to businesses, predominantly leasing companies, brokers, car dealers who are selling a lot of electric vehicles, but maybe don't have enough knowledge themselves to answer their customers' questions. So I do a lot of training with leasing companies, brokers to improve their EV knowledge so that they can differentiate themselves over their competition and say, look, we are a proper supplier of electric vehicles and we can help you make the journey. Because if they're just giving a price on a car, to be honest, that doesn't help the customer. The customer has still got lots of questions in their head. There's lots of things they don't know. And the more the supplier can help them with that, the better the supplier looks. So I do a lot of work training in that space as well with leasing companies and brokers and car dealers.
I mean, that's something that's really done, isn't it? Because of the fact that there's knowledge out there, but actually it's kind of it's not always easy to find out what you need to know. So
it's not, and you don't know what you don't know either. So there's lots of things that actually, I tend to bracket them into things I wish I'd known before I got into an electric vehicle. Now there's 600,000 of us now driving electric vehicles in this country. Some of them have been driving them for a very long time, and they've gone through the pain of early adoption. They've learnt the hard way when the range wasn't good, when the charging infrastructure wasn't very good. And they've got so much knowledge to impart, and anybody who drives an electric vehicle and has picked that knowledge up along the way is more than happy to share it with the new cohort of drivers just about to make the switch into electric. All I've done is I've turned that into a business.
Sounds really good idea. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, so what do I need to know? So before we started, I was talking to you a little bit, wasn't I? And saying, you know, I really want to do to make the transition to an electric vehicle myself.
Yeah.
What do I need to know? What are the main things that somebody needs to know when they're moving over to an electric vehicle?
I'd say the main thing, which encapsulates a lot of things, is you need to adopt a different mindset to electric vehicles than you have done in the past. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're looking at price, you will see that an electric vehicle right now is more expensive to buy or lease than a petrol vehicle. Let's forget diesel. Let's talk about petrol versus electric. Now, if you apply a different mindset to that and look at something called whole life cost or total cost of ownership, you will find that yes, the electric car is more expensive to buy or lease, but it's cheaper to run. And that's when you start factoring in everything else you're going to spend on that car. The electric car will be cheaper to maintain. It will be cheaper to fuel with electricity. For the next year or two, you may have noticed some announcements last week to the contrary, but there's no vehicle excise duty on electric cars. You need to roll in all of the things you're going to pay for and then see, after all of that, which one is cheaper. It's a compelling argument for a company car driver when you start to factor in company car tax, much more efficient on an electric car than a petrol car. So there's the first thing you probably want to be thinking about. If we take the mindset thing a little further into driving the vehicle, you need to have a different mindset in driving an electric vehicle as well. If you just drive an electric vehicle in the same way you've always driven a petrol vehicle, you're probably going to come unstuck. Things like planning a journey. you may not need to really plan a journey, maybe a long journey. Like as I mentioned, I live in Stafford, so if I drive down to Cornwall, as I've done on holiday, it would be foolish of me not to plan where I'm going to charge up somewhere on the way or somewhere on the way back. So that mindset of journey planning is crucial. And I would say have a plan of where you're going to charge if you need to charge, but also go a little further and have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, just in case your plan A is either busy or out of service. That way, you're not stitched up with charging anxiety. You just roll your eyes and swear a bit, and you move on to your plan B. So, but it doesn't disrupt you. That's a different mindset. And people might think, oh, yeah, that sounds like hard work. I've never had to do that before. But if I give my example of Cornwall from Stafford, that journey cost me £9 in fuel. And I worked out what it would have cost in my old car, my diesel BMW of old, would have cost me £91. So yes, there's a little bit of admin to do, but the payoff is huge in terms of financial savings. It's also huge if environment is a big agenda point for you, because of course you're driving around in a car that has no emissions from the tailpipe rather than disturbing the air quality with fumes. So yes, there is a little bit of a different mindset to get involved in, but the rewards are huge. You've just got to change it slightly.
And with a petrol or a diesel car, you've still got to find a petrol station, haven't you? And you've still got to go and and kind of fill it up and spend time, especially on a journey like you're saying down to Cornwall.
And people would say, but I haven't got time to stop. Well, if you're driving a 3-hour journey, bear in mind, ranges have got so much better on electric vehicles. I mean, the average is about 260 now. You can get cars with over 400 miles of range. Who needs that? But if you're driving that kind of distance, you're going to have a stop anyway, for whatever reason, whether it's a loo break, give the kids a break, stop for a meal. And if you're not, I'd probably want to question you that you're not safe on the road if you're driving for 5-6 hours without a break. This is really a mindset thing as well. Factor a charge into that stop you were going to make anyway. Just a slightly different process. It's not radical. It's just a slightly different process. You mentioned petrol stations as well. So a petrol driver's mindset would be probably drive, get low on fuel, and then think, oh yeah, must charge up. I'll stop at the next petrol station, and one will come along. But they might think, oh yeah, but I never see any electric vehicle charge points around. And people tend to try and pull into the petrol stations, the service stations on the motorways, and they all have charge points in them. And if I take an example, I mean, insert name of service station here, but Warwick Services, Cherwell Valley, so whatever. They've got charge points, but there's probably only 2 there, but massive traffic coming through them. I never charge up at motorway service stations because I know that they're the busiest. That's where I'm likely to queue. By looking at, and this is another mindset thing, by looking at some of the apps out there, the best one, in my opinion, being Zap-Map, you can have access to all of the charge points in the country. And I'll give you an example of a journey I make regularly down the M40. There's charge points at Warwick Services, and there's charge points at Oxford Services and Cherwell Valley Services, but there's 2 at each. What a petrol driver might not be aware of, because they haven't looked, and why would they, is that just in between those at Banbury, just off the motorway, and I mean a quarter of the mile off the motorway, there's a bank of 16 EV charge points. That's a different mindset to say, actually, let me have a look at the best place to charge up. And for a quarter of a mile deviation, you take yourself away from the queues at the service stations. So that's what I'm talking about with a slightly different mindset. That gives you a head start in EV driving.
Yeah, and that'll make a massive difference anyway, won't
Huge.
it? Just being able to, like you say, if you're going to somewhere that's always busy, you're just going to pull into it, aren't you? And have to wait. And yes, then that would stress somebody like me out, thinking, oh my God, I need to get to so and so. But actually, like you say, if you've got that technology that tells you where the nearest charging station, is it a charging station? Is that what they call it?
Charge points.
Charge points. But if it's a bank of 16, if it's a bank of 16, is it kind of like, do they call it a charging station? Or have I just made that up?
Charging hub. A charging hub.
Charging hub. You see, you taught me something new there, just even finding that bit.
A charging hub. But what's interesting here, Liz, is people say a lot, oh, the charging infrastructure is nowhere near developed enough. And somebody said that once, and everybody's taken it on board, a bit like sheep. But if I throw some stats at you from Zap-Map stats, and these are available, feel free to go on their website and check them because they're updated monthly. There are now over 59,000 connectors. So your point of reference there is petrol pumps. 59,000 in the UK and 21,000 locations, charging hubs, if you like. Your point of reference there is a petrol station. So if there's 21,000 EV charging locations, the obvious question is, well, how does that compare with petrol stations? Surely there must be thousands and thousands of petrol stations. So question for you, Liz, against 21,000 charging locations, how many petrol stations do you think there are in the country?
Do you know, I haven't got a clue. I don't know. I have no idea. I've not even thought about it. Go on, tell me.
8,300.
No.
So there's already nearly 3 times as many places to charge an EV up as there are petrol stations. It's just that the petrol driver wouldn't know where they are. Why would they? They haven't looked. But they're there, and that 16-point charging hub at Banbury is a great example. You can't see it from the motorway. It hasn't got the lovely neon shiny thing of a BP petrol station or a Shell petrol station, but it's there. And it's just a mindset thing to plan before you go on a long journey to look up where you want to charge. It's not difficult. It takes 2 or 3 minutes. And then that takes away things like range anxiety, charging anxiety, because you know where you're going to stop. You've got a backup plan even if that doesn't work. And I think I've been driving EVs for over 4 years now, and I'm driving 2 EVs in the family for nearly a year now. I have only ever waited at a charge point once, and it was for about 5 minutes.
Right.
So with some planning, why would I, if I've got a choice of going to somewhere that's got 1 charge point or going to somewhere that's got 4 or 8, clearly I'm going to go to somewhere that's got more charge points because there's less chance of a queue. That's just a different mindset thing. You wouldn't think about that as a petrol driver going to a petrol station. So it's just a little different tweak to take away range anxiety and charging anxiety.
And kind of, I've seen some of the new charging locations, now that I know the phrase, that are actually a bit like a service station because they're starting to put shops and things into those locations. So how is that working well then? You know,
it is working well. What you're referring there to is a fantastic company called Gridserve. So Gridserve have built these huge charging hubs, and the first one went in Braintree in Essex, and then the second went in Norwich, and now the third one is under construction in Gatwick Airport. So that they have committed to build 100 of these things. They're not designed to take the place of a motorway service station, so they are strategically placed in towns, and normally towns that have a slightly sparser charging infrastructure around them. But these things have up to 36 charge points in it. So think of a massive petrol station with 36 petrol pumps in it. It's that kind of thing. And the Gridserve examples have got little mini booths, supermarkets, they've got cafes, they may have a little WH Smith, they'll have a Costa coffee, they've got a little gym in there, they've got areas you can work if you want to, for the half an hour you're going to charge. So all of these things. But even the ones by the roadside, you can check on Zap-Map what facilities a place has. And I've fallen foul of this. The very first time I used the public charging infrastructure all those years ago, planned my journey up to Yorkshire, actually. I was driving up to Pickering. And we knew where we were going to stop, just outside York, and it was absolutely fine. But I turned up, and the charge point was there, and it was fine, and it was free, so we went straight on it. But there were no toilets, and my wife was dying for the loo, and I was not popular. But Zap-Map tells you all of the facilities. I'll never make that mistake again. Things I wish I'd known before I got into an electric vehicle. Well, you can check your charge points. If a toilet is really important to you when you're going to stop, you can check whether the planned stop you're going to make has a toilet there, and whether it has tea or coffee, or whether it has contactless payment, or all of these things. So Zap-Map's a real friend to the EV driver because it gives you everything you need to know up front. You just need to look at it.
That sounds such a good idea, especially having somewhere that's got facilities, especially, if you're traveling with family and small kids who always need a wee, don't they?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? On the
Yeah.
way back, or need to go to the loo twice or whatever, or you want to go and get a bite to eat or something like that.
Yeah, and
There's-
over time, you're a bit like a petrol driver. I'm sure you've got your favourite petrol stations and service stations because they might have a Costa Coffee or a Starbucks or a Booths, or you like the toilets because they're nice and clean. Whatever your reasons are for favourites, maybe it's got a McDonald's next to it or a KFC. EV drivers are the same. They will develop their favourites because of charging speed, lots of connectors, easy to use. It's got a Costa next door to it. So if you do regular journeys, you don't have to plan that journey every time. Just plan it once, and then that memory's logged in. So I know, I've got my favourites. I've got my favourite charge point operators. So like in petrol terms, you're thinking BP, Shell, Esso, Texaco. In EV charge point terms, we're thinking Gridserve, Instavolt, Osprey, Ionity, and there are some, and some are good and some are bad, and you tend to gravitate towards the ones that you trust because they're reliable, they're easy to use, and they're on the routes you go on regularly. So that just develops over time. EV drivers will always help you with that in advance and say, steer clear of these ones are really good. So you get a head start, but get out there and ask people. Ask people what they think. EV drivers will always share their knowledge.
See, that's really good, especially thinking about, kind of what you need to understand in advance. And I suppose for me as a woman, the other thing that I suppose is really important for me is safety. So I'm driving a lot more since the end of lockdown. I'm getting out quite a lot. I'm on motorways. If I need to charge my electric vehicle, does that map? Are there places where they're making sure that it's safe? Because it's not just women that need to be safe, is it? Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
But that's kind of in the back of my mind.
But you make a very good point, and there's a company that set themselves up to address exactly that. It's a company called Charge Safe, and Charge Safe go round effectively scoring charge points to see whether they are safe. So are they well lit, for instance? Are they covered so you can charge in the rain? They are particularly aimed at the single female driver because the founder of that company is a female, is a lady called Kate, and she had the experience that you were nervous of. She was plugging in her electric vehicle. She didn't feel safe because it wasn't well lit. There were a gang of guys over there, and she didn't like the experience, and she thought, no, this isn't right. So she set up a whole company on the basis of that and goes round scoring them and saying, look, you need to have facilities in place. It needs to be well lit. It needs to be well covered. There needs to be sufficient space to park. There's a consideration for vans as well. Vans are bigger than cars. So can you get to the charge point in a high-sided vehicle or in a wide vehicle? It even takes into account facilities for the disabled EV driver because public charge points can be notoriously difficult for a disabled driver. The cables are very heavy and cumbersome to use. Sometimes there isn't a dropped curb. That's no use for a wheelchair driver. So these things are being taken into account by ChargeSafe, which is superb effort from Kate, because it means that people coming in new to electric vehicles have got an information source to check whether somewhere is going to be safe to charge.
That's an absolute fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Just, and I have heard of ChargeSafe. I think
Superb
pulling all
company.
of that together, the innovation that's actually happening at the moment across the electric vehicle and the electric vehicle infrastructure sector is just astounding. I love it.
In some ways, it's quite scary. It's almost witchcraft, some of the things that are going on. Certainly around charging, it's incredible what's going on.
It just blows my mind, honestly, and I can't wait. One thing, and I was going to ask you about. So there's a few things I still want to ask you about. My nephew was he's been driving an electric vehicle, like a kind of his car had broken down, and so he was talking to me. He was down last weekend and he was talking about regenerative braking and trying to explain it to me. And I just wanted you to kind of, because I think it's really important, because people don't realise about
Crucial.
If you've not got an EV, you would not understand. I get the fact that you sit in an EV. I've not actually test driven one yet, so this is my main thing. This is part of my journey, going and test driving. but actually I want to understand some of this, like I said to you before I get in, and I know some of it, you put your foot on the accelerator and it's not kind of like takes 1 second, you have to put your foot down, it just goes, doesn't it? But what is regenerative braking? How does that work?
Right. So regenerative braking is another way to slow the car down without touching the brake pedal, which sounds quite scary, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why would you you wouldn't want to put somebody in an electric car and them not know that, because they think, oh, what's wrong with my car? It feels like the handbrake's still on. So that's what regenerative braking is. How does it work? Well, normally when you're driving a car and you put your foot on the accelerator in an electric car, you are effectively sending a message from the battery to the motor to say, power, go forward, apply power. When you take your foot off the accelerator, you are effectively reversing that process. So you're sending a message from the motor back to the battery to say, slow the vehicle down. So if you think of a canoeist who is canoeing forwards like that in a canoe, what would happen to the boat if the canoeist suddenly started to paddle backwards? The boat would slow down?
Yeah.
That's what's happening. That is what's happening with regenerative braking. Why is it so crucial and a fantastic feature for electric vehicle drivers? What's happening when you are reversing the process and sending energy back into the battery, therefore slowing the vehicle down? You are effectively putting miles back into your battery. So not only are you slowing the vehicle down, you are enhancing the range of the vehicle. Effectively, you're putting 3 miles back into your battery. And whatever car you get, you'll have an app from the manufacturer. So as I said, I've got 2 Kias, and they give you the stats on your app. So I know in my e-Nero, for every 9 miles I drive, I get 1 back free by using regenerative braking. So it turns into a real game, and it promotes very good, safe, smooth driving, because you tend to look further ahead for opportunities to take your foot off the pedal and slow down without using the brake pedal. So that is good driving practice that any driver trainer would talk to you about. Well, this promotes it, and it starts to get a bit competitive. You're in competition with your vehicle to see if you can recover some miles. And I regularly, you have a brake pedal too, of course, and I would set off, if I were driving, you're based in Reading, so if I were driving from Stafford to Reading, as I do regularly, I would actually set myself a challenge to make that whole journey without touching the brake pedal. Now that sounds a bit scary, and of course, if I'm in a situation where I need to brake heavily, of course I use the brake pedal. But the better I drive, the more I get rewarded. And that's the gamification piece of this. If you just use your regen, as it's shortened to slow down, and you can set the level of regen in your car. So you might have light touch regen or heavy aggressive regen, up to you. Obviously with heavier regen, the car slows down quicker. That's a more jerkier feel, but you get more energy back into your battery. So you can set the terms of this, but it's really, really competitive. And there's a couple of things to bear in mind with regen as well. Does the brake light come on when you slow down? Because obviously the brake light is a safety feature that when you touch your brake pedal, the brake light comes on to warn the people behind you slowing down. So now we're slowing down without touching the brake pedal. So how does that work? That all depends on how fast you're going and how harshly you're braking. And if you're going fast enough, and if you're braking hard enough through your regen, the brake light will still come on, even without touching the brake pedal. If you're pooping around the Tesco car park at 5 miles an hour, it won't come on because it doesn't need to.
That is just amazing.
Does that answer your question? That's regen in a nutshell. Superb feature of all electric vehicles.
I love it. Oh
Brilliant.
My God. I definitely need to get behind the wheel of one. I really, really do, honestly.
Yeah, you will really enjoy regenerative braking. You touched on a couple of others. What else will feel different about driving an electric car? Well, regen will be one. You mentioned another one, which is you'll feel a lot of power under your right foot. Instant acceleration. This doesn't work up through the gears. It's there straight away. So that's fantastic, but in the wrong hands, imagine getting into a BMW, an Audi, a Jaguar, or whatever, and not know that. Suddenly you're away. So if I were getting somebody into an electric vehicle, I'd want to familiarise them with that. You will find the vehicle is very, very quiet because there's no engine noise. Literally silent when you turn it on, give or take children in the back and stereo. Turn those off and the car is silent, to the point where new electric vehicles now have to have an artificial noise when they are reversing at low speeds. Because you're a safety risk to the pedestrian behind you who can't hear you, especially maybe a pensioner who's hard of hearing, teenager who is wrapped up on their mobile phone with headphones in or whatever. I would want a driver to be aware that they are a potential safety risk when reversing at low speeds to the people behind them. That's another mindset thing that's a little different about an electric vehicle. And the other thing I'd make a new driver aware of is your tyre pressures will probably need to be a little bit higher in an electric vehicle than you're used to. Much heavier because of the battery, makes sense, doesn't it? So, but a lot of people aren't aware of that. And if your tyre pressures are wrong, up or down, like a petrol car, you won't get the best fuel economy. So keep an eye on your tyre pressures as well to make sure you get the most out of your car.
See, this awareness, like I say, my nephew, like I said, he had this electric vehicle when his car was in dock. And I don't think anybody told him any of this,
No, doesn't surprise me. Disappoints me, but it doesn't surprise me.
So can I just ask you then, when you're helping companies, what are you doing to support them, and who are your clients that you deal with and you work with, and what do you do to help them?
Okay, so if I talk about my clients in the lease co sector, broker sector, if I talk about my major clients, so I'm the EV trainer for the BVRLA, British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association, and I'm the EV trainer for the Association of Fleet Professionals. What am I doing there? I'm running courses. I have 3 courses I've written for them. 4 actually. One of them is an operational EV course. What's it like to live with an electric vehicle? What do I need to know? How long will the battery last? Will the national grid cope if everybody plugs in? Are they safe? Do they catch fire? Tips and techniques to maximize range. How many vehicles are out there? What's coming in terms of new technology? What's coming in terms of new launches of manufacturers? Can I take an EV abroad? What's it like to service an electric vehicle? Operational stuff to live with an electric vehicle. So that's one course. I do a course on salary sacrifice, which is a really, really exploded in popularity as a way of financing an electric vehicle. So I talk to people in detail about that. I've also got a course around the mindset of selling an electric vehicle. I don't think it's good enough just to say, here's my car and here's the price, or here's my car, haven't I got a wonderful boot space? The analogy I use for that course is you could be a leisure centre manager and you're selling the benefits of your swimming pool, and you've got amazing crystal clear water, it's a 50 length pool, 10 diving boards, and you're thinking this is all wonderful. But if you haven't taken the trouble to ask whether your client can swim, you've got a bit of work to do first before you've earned the right to sell your leisure centre. So mindset of selling an EV is another one I do. And for the fleets out there, I run a training course, which is I know I need to go electric, but I don't know how. So I've developed a really detailed EV roadmap in 4 pillars, 4 modules to say, this is everything you need to think about if you want to take your fleet through to electric by 2030, when you'll be aware there is a ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles. If you run a fleet, you've got to go electric by 2030, whether you like it or not. How do you go about that? So those are the kind of things I do with my trainers. Who else do I work with? Well, I work with Select Car Leasing. I work with Electrics. I work with CBVC and Key Fleet. So they're all brokers supplying cars. I do some work for LeasePlan. I'm also McDonald's fleet advisor, so McDonald's restaurants. I do some work for McDonald's as well. So yeah, I mix around. It's lovely to have a lovely broad base of clients like that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So if people actually are interested in contacting you, obviously we met through a mutual connection on LinkedIn, didn't we?
We did.
And I know that you're quite active on LinkedIn, but where else can people find you? On social media and their website?
So social media is really limited to LinkedIn. So it's John Burdekin, John without an H. So you can find me on there. Burdekin is Burdekin. Sounds like Burger King. That's easy way to remember it. You can have a look at my website. So that's jbfleetconsulting.co.uk. or email is Jon, @jbfleetconsulting.co.uk. And if anybody's got a question, just fire it over. I'll happily share my knowledge with them.
Well, it's been absolutely fascinating to speak to you. And I think there's so much more we could talk about. So
we've not scratched the surface.
I know. I'm really, especially when I finally get a drive day and I finally get behind the wheel of an electric vehicle, I know that it's going to make a massive difference. And you
will. It's very, very rare that somebody gets into an electric vehicle for the first time and doesn't come away with a smile on their face.
I can't wait, honestly. Listen,
doesn't matter what car you go for. Doesn't matter. Any badge on the front, whatever you prefer, but you'll come away saying that was fun.
Fantastic. Right, so, I'm going to end there. I'll definitely get you back on, but I'm going to say goodbye
You're
to
welcome.
everybody now.
Anytime.
Thank you ever so much for your time, and to everyone else, see you later. Bye.
It's a pleasure.
You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon.